All right, today we are talking about section 9.4 in your textbook, which is selecting a sample. So there are many types of sampling techniques, and the textbook here gives you a number of different ones that you can be familiar with. There are by no means all the ones that you could do, but they are enough. So the first one that we're going to talk about is just a simple random sampling method. And this is when each member of the population has an equal chance of being chosen. For an example of this is if you were to, you want to do a survey of your entire class, and you pull your five class names out of a hat, and you randomly sample those 5 people. Just random, it's based on chance, and everybody has a chance of having their say, or everyone has the chance of being chosen to have their say. The next one is systemic sampling. This is when you decide every member of a population is chosen. So if you were doing a survey, you wanted to ask every 10th person who entered the school. And so you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You. I wonder if this is something to do with how airports decide to screen people. Hey, you are the 10th customer. Congratulations, you get swabbed. I don't know. They might have something a little bit more random. Also, it would be something that would be done in like a factory. Every 10th battery, actually probably more like every 100th battery gets checked to see if it is up to standard. That makes sense? There are cluster samplings. And cluster samplings are when the population is divided into groups, and then every member of the chosen group is sampled. So if a school has 5 grade 9 classes, choosing one of those grade 9 classes and sampling that would be a cluster sample. It's convenient because you've got everyone there, but it's not necessarily the most accurate data all the time. It can be though, it can. So self-selecting samples or sampling asks for volunteers, members of your population to volunteer to be chosen. So 40 students volunteer to take a survey about work habits. So 2 more samplings, and then we'll be done talking about the different types, and then we'll talk about how they work together and some examples as to how to apply them. Stratified random sampling is when you group members of a sample again into different, like a cluster sample, but instead of just asking for members of one group, you add little random samples of each group. So the school's population is divided into grades, grade 9, grade 10, grade 11, grade 12, and 10 students from each grade are sampled. So there'll be 10 grade 12s, 10 grade 11s, 10 grade 10s, and 10 grade 9s chosen to be sampled. And those actually give out fairly decent data. Convenience sampling is another type that we're going to talk about. Members of a population who are convenient are chosen. So the principal chooses the first 3 boys she sees to help her choose the word of the week. It's a convenient sample. And honestly, choosing the word of the week is not something that you need a lot of valid data to go ahead and choose. So there you have it. And a lot of these things, if you look back at them, you think, well, they wouldn't yield the most accurate data. And in some cases, they all have different purposes. A simple random sampling is pretty good if you've got a group that's the population is very similar, very homogeneous. Homogeneous meaning they all kind of look alike, or they all kind of share different characteristics. So if your group looks alike or shares certain important characteristics, a random sampling technique is very good, especially if it's a very large population. In systemic sampling, if you're on a factory line, that's very good. But if you're talking about maybe when people enter a school building, or the fourth student on each school's chosen, or each school's student list being chosen, that may or may not be as random as you would like, and it might not be a cross section for the entire population. So the cluster sampling method can be very good if you just need a quick sample. It's not going to be the end all be all of it. Or if you're just interested in what that particular group within the population has to say, and you're not interested in the whole population, although then technically your population that you're curious about would switch. But it does have some applications. Self-selecting, that when you volunteer, these can be very inaccurate depending on how they're used. So a radio station puts out a survey, you know, what do you think of the number of arsons in the city, or something like that, which used to be a problem in Moose Jaw, but it certainly isn't right now. Well, the radio station is going to get a lot of people who are loud voices and who want to make sure they're heard, but they're not going to get a really accurate sample of the entire city, because there's lots of people who won't answer it. Either they don't listen to the radio station, or they're just don't want to call in, don't have the time, don't have the inclination, you know, lots of different reasons. And so it can be extremely inaccurate. So if someone says, we asked for volunteers for this survey, that's not necessarily the best way to do it for accurate results all the time. It depends, right? But it can be very accurate if, for example, Ms. Garner from Rex's Diner here at Riverview says, hey, I'd like to know what the student body wants a new meal to be. Vote on some suggestions I have at the front of my window there where you make orders, whatever that's called. And so that would probably be more accurate, because people who are more likely to answer it are the people who are more likely to be purchasing from her anyways. And she's more interested in what people who are already purchasing want to eat, because she'd want to keep them eating. You know, people who go home for lunch, she's not as interested in what they would want, because if they're not going to buy lunches from her because they're going home, that would make her data less valid, because then she's not targeting the people who do shop from her. Okay, the stratified random sampling can be really great if we want to know, what does the school think about banning cell phones? Well, if we ask 10 kids from each grade, you'd probably have a pretty good idea as to what the entire school thought. I mean, specifically at Riverview, where we only have less than 100 students. I mean, at Peacock, if you only ask 10 students from each grade, that would probably be a problem. They've got a much larger population. Convenience sampling, once again, it can be very inaccurate. Like if you just do a convenience sample, you know, the first 3 people you see in the hall, you just ask them your sample question because you don't feel like doing any more, then that can be very false or misleading. But once again, taking the example of Shelley Garner, Ms. Garner, if she just puts the survey at the counter where you order, that's quite convenient for her. And it's also probably going to give her pretty accurate results, because anyone who cares is going to be ordering food from her, which then will be on the counter when they order the food. They'll be able to fill out the survey very easily. So sometimes convenience samples are more accurate than even a census. Well, yeah, than even a census. You can also combo these things. The example with Shelley Garner is both a convenience sample and a self-selecting sample where you volunteer. It's both of them. Oh, hey, and here it is. Ms. Garner wants to find out if students would like Rex's Diner to have longer hours. She thought about several sampling methods and explained whether each sample is appropriate. So Every student's name is put into a box and 40 names are selected randomly to be surveyed. This is a simple random survey is what this is. And it's not valid because the students may not use or care about Rex's Diner, and so therefore the responses may not be valid. So every 5th person entering the school is selected. This is systemic sampling. It's also convenient. It's not valid for the same reasons as above. The people may or may not care. She asked staff members only, but not students. Well, not valid, unless the staff members were then talking to students, because of the same reasons as above, and staff members aren't her only type of customer. So this is a convenient sampling, but it's also, she's also grouped, it's a cluster sampling. I should have this in here as well. This is a cluster sample as well, because she's asked the cluster of the population, which are teachers. So she sells to students in each grade, and she sells to staff. And staff is only one of her groups that she sells to. An announcement is made asking anyone who wishes to participate to fill out a ballot, or fill in a ballot. This is a self-selecting sample and it's valid. Only people who care about the results will vote, right? Most probably valid, I should say, because all of these things are, they're a little hit or miss. So a company packages boxes of granola bars. The quality control manager inspects the first 5 boxes each morning to ensure that each has the same number and types of granola bars. So is this a good way of ensuring quality control? Explain. Well, we said no. All samples are taken at the exact same time, so you have no idea what's happened in the last 24 hours. It's just the 5 boxes right in the morning. The first 5 boxes. But this is a type of convenience method, sampling method. It's also a cluster sampling method. So either one of them, but it's not very applicable or valid in this situation. So just 2 other sampling techniques that would be more appropriate. So a simple random, taking a sample at different times of the day, randomly throughout the day. You put a bunch of times into a hat and you say 10:45, 1:15, 11:02, 3:57, and then you test at those times. That would be another way of doing it. Or, and honestly, this is probably going to be your best technique, a systemic one. Take 1 sample every hour or every 2 hours, or just test every 100th box that comes off the assembly line. Either of those 2 techniques would be better than just grabbing the first 5 boxes of granola at the beginning of the day. And that is the notes. This is the final project for the unit that you would be doing if we had 1 more week, but we don't. So you will not be doing this design a project plan. You will have a little bit less. All right, so that is that. Any questions, concerns?
No.
No? Okay, I'm going to stop the video then.